Now read this.
Hello and welcome back to Now Read This, Lloyd Alexander's The Chronicles of Prydain, Book 3, The Castle of Llyr, Chapter 10, The Cavern. Heedless of Fflewdder's warning shout, Terran leapt into the pit and slid quickly past a mesh of torn roots. The hole widened a little, then dropped straight. Calling for the bard to lower a length of vine, he let himself fall, then scrambled to his feet and struggled to lift up the unconscious Rune, who was bleeding heavily from a gash at the side of his head. The end of the vine dangled from above. Terran seized and lashed it securely under the prince's arms, shouting for Fflewdder and Gurgi to pull him up. The vine tautened, strained, and snapped. Earth and stones showered from the raw sides of the hole. "Beware!" Terran cried. "The ground is giving way."
"Afraid you're right," Fflewdder called back. "In that case, I think we'd better give you a hand from down there."
Terran saw the soles of Fflewdder's boots plunge toward him. The bard landed with a grunt, and Gurgi, whose hair looked as though it had scraped away most of the dirt from the hole, tumbled after. Prince Rune's eyelids fluttered.
Hello, he murmured. "What happened? These roots are surprisingly deep."
"The land must be eaten away along the riverbank," Terran said. "When you pulled, the strain and weight opened up this hole. Never fear," he added quickly. "We'll soon have you out. Help us to turn you. Can you move at all?" The prince nodded, gritted his teeth, and, with the companions lifting him, began painfully clambering up the side of the pit. But he had gone no more than halfway when he lost his handhold. Terran scrambled to block his fall. Rune clutched wildly at a root and hung poised a moment in mid-air. The root tore free, and Rune plummeted downward. The wall of earth rumbled as the pit collapsed around them. Terran flung up his arms against the rush of soil and shale. He was thrown down, the ground cracked at his feet, fell away, and left him spinning in nothingness. A violent shock stunned him. Loose earth filled his nose and mouth, lungs bursting. He fought against the weight pressing the life from him. It was only then he realized he had stopped falling. His head still reeled, but he twisted and clawed his way through dirt and pebbles. He heaved himself upward, breathing once again. Gasping and trembling, he dropped at full length on a sloping rocky floor, in darkness so deep it seemed to suffocate him. At last, regaining strength enough to lift his head, he tried vainly to peer through the shadows that filled his eyes. He called to the companions, but no answer came. His voice rang with a strange, hollow echo. In despair, he shouted once more.
Hello,
called another voice. "Prince Rune," Terran cried. "Where are you? Are you safe?"
"I don't know," answered the prince. "If I could see better, I could tell you better."
Raising himself to hands and knees, Terran crawled forward. His groping fingers met a shaggy mass that stirred and whimpered. "Terrible, oh, terrible," moaned Gurgi. "Rumbling and crumblings fling poor Gurgi into fearsome blackness. He cannot see."
"Great Bellin,"
came Fflewdder's voice out of the darkness.
"I'm delighted to hear that. For a moment I thought I'd been struck blind. I swear I can see more with my eyes shut."
Ordering Gurgi to hang on to his belt, Terran crept in the direction of the bard's voice. Soon the companions had found each other again, and also Prince Rune, who had managed to drag himself toward them. "Fflewdder," Terran said in an anxious voice, "I fear the landslide has blocked the pit. Dare we try to dig our way out?"
"I don't think it's so much a question of digging as it is of finding, if you take my meaning," replied the bard. "Whether we can burrow through all that dirt is, to say the least of it, highly doubtful. Even a mole would have trouble, though I'm willing to give it a try. A flam is undaunted. But," he added, "without a light to guide us, we shall spend the rest of our days looking for the right spot to dig."
Terran nodded and knitted his brow. "It's true. Light is as precious to us as air." He turned to Gurgi. "Try to use your flints. We have no tinder here, but if I can catch the spark on my cloak, It may be enough to set it alight. He heard rustling, slapping sounds, as though Gurgi was searching himself all over, and then a dismal wail. "Firestones are gone!" Gurgi moaned. "Wretched Gurgi cannot make bright blazing. He has lost them. Oh, misery and sorrow! Gurgi will go alone to seek them." Terran patted the creature's shoulder. "Stay here with us," he said. "I value your life more than firestones. We shall find some other way." "Wait!" he cried. "Eilonwy's bauble! If only it will light for us!" Quickly he thrust into his jacket and drew out the sphere. For a moment he held it covered in his hands, fearing disappointment should the bauble fail to glow. Holding his breath, he slowly moved a hand away. The golden sphere lay cupped in his palm. He could feel its smooth, cool surface and its weight, which was somehow not weight at all. He sensed the eyes of the companions on him, and could guess at their hopeful glances. But the darkness pressed heavier and more stifling than ever. The bauble gave not the slightest glimmer. "I cannot do it," Terran murmured. "I fear it is not given to an assistant pig-keeper to command such a thing of beauty and enchantment."
"No sense in my trying," said Prince Rune. "I know I can't make it work. The very first time I held it, the thing blinked out the moment it was in my hands. Surprising. The Princess Eilonwy could light it so easily."
Terran groped toward Fluda and put the sphere into his hand. "You know the law of the bards and the ways of enchantments," he urged. "Perhaps it will obey you. Try, Fluda. Our lives depend on it."
"Yes, well," replied Fluda, "I must admit I have no great skill in these things. The true lore of the bards, sorry to say, has always been a little beyond me. There's simply too much to know, and I could never squeeze more than a drop or two into my head. But a flam is willing."
Moments passed, then Terran heard Fluda sigh with discouragement.
"Can't get the hang of it," muttered the bard. "I even tried rapping it on the ground, but that doesn't do either. Here, let our friend Gurgi have a go at it."
"Woe and sorrow!" moaned Gurgi, after the bard had passed the sphere to him, and he had held it for a while. "Even with teasings and squeezings, even with battings and pattings, unhappy Gurgi cannot bring golden winkings."
"A flam never despairs,"
cried Fluda. "But," he added dolefully,
"I'm coming rapidly to believe this pit will be our grave, without even a decent mound to mark the spot. A flam is cheerful, but this is the disheartening situation, no matter how you look at it."
Gurgi silently gave the bauble back to Terran, who, heavy-hearted, cupped it in his hands again. With yearning now he held it, and his mind turned from his own plight to thoughts of Eilonwy. He saw her face, and once more heard her gay laughter ring clearer than the notes of Fluda's harp. He smiled to himself, even as he recalled her chattering and her sharp words. He was about to return the bauble to his jacket, but stopped short and stared at his hand. A point of light had begun to flicker in the depths of the sphere. As he watched, not daring to breathe, it blossomed and shimmered. Terran sprang to his feet with a cry not of triumph, but of wonder. Golden beams shone around him faintly, but steadily. Trembling, he raised the sphere high above his head. "Kind master saves us!" cried Gurgi. Yes, he takes us from loomings and gloomings. Joy and happiness, fearful darkness is gone. Gurgi can see again."
"Amazing!" cried Prince Rune. "Astonishing! Look at this cave! I never knew we had such a place on Mona."
Again Terran cried out in wonder. Until now he had believed they had fallen into something like a large burrow. The glow of Eilonwy's bauble showed they had come instead to the edge of an enormous cavern. It stretched before them like a forest after an ice storm. Columns of stone rose like the trunks of trees and arched to the ceiling where stone icicles clung. Along the shadowy walls, huge outcroppings sprang like hawthorn blossoms and glittered in the bowl's golden rays. Threads of scarlet and vivid green twisted through luminous shafts of rock. White tendrils of crystal curled along jagged walls, gleaming with rivulets of water. Still other chambers lay beyond this one, and Terran caught sight of wide pools, flat and glistening as mirrors. Some gave a dull greenish glow, others a pale blue. "What have we found?" Terran whispered. Can this be part of the fair folks' realm? Fluda shook his head.
The fair folks surely have tunnels and caves where you'd least expect them, but I doubt this is one. There's no sign of life at all.
Gurgi did not speak, but stared with round eyes at the cavern. Prince Rune, an expression of delight on his face, stepped ahead.
I say, this really is surprising, he said. I shall have to tell my father about this and see if he won't open it up to visitors. It would be a shame to keep it hidden away.
It is a place of great beauty, Terran said in a hushed voice.
And a deadly place for us, replied Fluda. A flam enjoys the scenery. That's one advantage of being a wandering bard. But from the outside, if I make myself clear, which I believe is where we should put ourselves as quickly as we can.
The companions retraced their steps to where the landslide had carried them. As Terran had feared, the light of the golden ball showed that digging a passage would be in vain, for heavy boulders filled the pit, blocking it entirely. While Prince Rune rested on one of the table-like stones and Gurgi delved into his wallet for food, Terran and Fluda spoke hastily between themselves. We must find another passage, Terran said. King Rudlam and his men will never reach Eilonwy now. We are the only ones who know the direction Mag has taken.
All too true, Fluda glumly replied. Yet I fear that knowledge is going to stay locked up with us here. Akron herself couldn't have thrown us into a stronger prison. There are surely other ways in and out, the bard went on, but these caverns can stretch on who knows how far. Underground they may be enormous, and the entry no bigger than a rabbit hole.
Nevertheless, they agreed they had no choice but to continue into the cavern and seek a passage leading them above ground. Keeping the Prince of Mona protectively between them, Terran and the bard set off through the forest of stone, with Gurgi trotting behind and clutching Terran's belt. Without warning, Prince Rune suddenly cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted,
"Hello! Hello!"
at the top of his voice.
"Anyone here? Hello?"
"Rune," Terran cried, "be silent! You will bring more danger on us."
"I should hardly think so," answered Rune innocently. "It seems to me that finding someone or something is better than finding nothing at all."
"And risk our necks doing so?" Terran retorted. He halted until the echoes had died away. No further sound came from the reaches of the cavern, and Terran warily beckoned the companions forward. The ground dipped, and they found themselves amid stones that jutted like huge teeth from the ground. Further on, the cavern floor rolled and twisted in high waves and deep valleys, as though a stormy sea had been frozen motionless. Another chamber held massive piles of rocks and tall mounds that had taken the fanciful shapes of unmoving clouds. Here, the toiling companions rested a moment, for the path had narrowed and grown more difficult. The air was heavy, stagnant as swamp water, and chilled them to the bone. Terran urged them to their feet once more, and anxious to find a tunnel leading upward, but fearing more and more that their search would be long and painful. A glance at the bard's face told Terran that Fluda shared his fears.
"I say, there's an odd thing," called Rune, pointing to a tumble of rock.
It was, indeed, one of the strangest shapes Terran had seen in the cavern, for it looked like a hen's egg sticking halfway out of a nest. The stone was white, smooth, and somewhat pointed at the top, crusted here and there with patches of lichen, and stood nearly as tall as Terran himself. What at first resembled a nest was a tangled, discoloured fringe of coarse strands that seemed to balance on the edge of a sharp drop.
"Amazing!"
called Rune, who had insisted on striding closer to peer at it.
"This isn't a rock at all," he turned in surprise to the companions. "This is unbelievable, but it's almost like—"
Terran seized the astonished Rune and dragged him backward so abruptly the prince nearly went head over heels. Gurgi yelped in terror. The shape had begun to move. Two colourless eyes appeared in a face pale as a dead fish. The eyebrows glittered with flecks of crystal, moss and mould edged the long flapping ears and spread over the beard that sprouted below a lumpy nose. Swords drawn, the companions huddled against the jagged wall. A huge head continued to rise, and Taran saw it wobble on a skinny neck. A choking noise bubbled in the creature's throat as it cried,
"Puny things, tremble before me, tremble, I tell you, I am glue, I am glue."
Hey, you want to buy something? You can check the description for my books and audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.